Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As I think most of you know by now, Women of Reform Judaism is honoring several remarkable women during our upcoming Women's Empowerment Awards event on May 13th. And to help learn about our honorees, get familiar with them, hear their stories, each week we're releasing a video about one of them, highlighting their achievements and engaging them in conversation here on Facebook Live. Now, who you don't see on screen is our wonderful associate on the philanthropy team, Natalie Bowles, who is helping us with our technology today. But who you do see on the screen are me, Blair Marks, a past president of Women of Reform Judaism, and our honoree, Rabbi Susan Shankman of Washington Hebrew Congregation. And we're going to spend some time just chatting. But let me do a little introducing first. I want to share with you some of the information that was in the nomination package for Rabbi Shankman. Rabbi Shankman recognizes that when the voice of one woman is lifted, the voices of all women are lifted by extension. An advocate, a scholar, and a mensch, Rabbi Shankman has been modeling what it means to be a dynamic woman and clergy member throughout her career. She knows that to raise up women, we need women who can pave the way with dignity, kindness, and bravery. And she sets the bar high for herself and others, helping everyone around her to do better and attain more. She elevates women and congregants from a place of warmth. And when women support one another, as Rabbi Sue Shankman does, it elevates everyone, not only women, but all people. So with that, we're going to dive into some questions. And let's start with this, Rabbi, kind of a broad question. What does women's empowerment mean to you and your career life's work?
Well, Blair, first, I want to thank you for that beautiful introduction. I think my parents are listening, so I'm sure they were thrilled. And really, it's so nice to be with you. And I'm so incredibly honored by the Women of Reform Judaism. Women's empowerment to me is in many ways Women of Reform Judaism. I grew up watching and experiencing women lifting up women and seeing the ways in which the women of my home congregation, Temple Israel of New Rochelle, did so much to contribute to the ongoing work of the congregation, and certainly experienced that with my own mother, a past president of our Temple Israel sisterhood. And when she came to Washington Hebrew, of course, that was one of the first things she wanted to do is join our Women of Washington Hebrew congregation to be able to be part of the community. So women's empowerment is about providing opportunities for women to come together to not just lift up each other's voices, which is certainly an important aspect, but also to have the support for all of the different realities that women face in our lives, juggling as women, as mothers, as sometimes as full-time working mothers, sometimes as domestic engineers, as I like to call them, because I know that my days off are often my busiest days, filled with everything, taking care of a family, and for women to be able to support each other and ensure that women are represented. And so for me, not just to see women on the bema, but certainly in all aspects of congregational life and in the world around us, to be able, women's empowerment is about making sure that anyone who wants to raise their voice, but also sometimes those who might be a little reluctant to, are encouraged and feel supported in whatever their work might be.
That's great. So thinking about that, what is one of your proudest moments in lifting the voices of others who may not have a platform to do so themselves?
Well, I will say I've had the honor and privilege and really, truly the blessing over the past 21 years at Washington Hebrew Congregation to work with 11, I think it's 11, amazing, they've all been amazing, but I think it's 11 women who have been our presidents of our sisterhood, now called Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation. And really just being able to support our leadership, our our leadership of our sisterhood in creating and crafting their vision and engaging others to be part of that as well. So that is certainly on an ongoing basis. But in terms of proud moments, one such moment was a mom moment and a rabbi moment a few years back when we had the March for Our Lives following the gun violence in February, I believe it was 2018 in Florida, and having the March for Our Lives that our young people were inspiring us to get engaged and get involved. And we hosted a service the night before the march here at Washington Hebrew Congregation. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, Isabel Namath, was at the time the religious and cultural vice president for NIFTY MAR, and helped to facilitate and coordinate that evening and that service. And watching her get up, and this is watching her get up in front of our movement and talk about, as did so many other young adults, young leaders, really our current and future leaders, being able to see and enable them to speak from a place of pain and loss, and also to watch them inspire the adults who joined in following them on that march. Really was incredibly a proud moment for me, certainly as a mother, but even more so in watching our congregation come out in support of all of these young adults, and watching them do the work that perhaps we as adults had not yet done in areas an area where we failed as a society, but a reminder as well that we can't give up, and we have a purpose and a reason for continuing to do this work. So that certainly was a proud moment. But another one was just to share some of the work that we've been doing in the congregation that was brought to us by lay leaders, a program called Sea Change that we've been involved in, which stands for Study, Engage, Act. And then that ideally leads to change. And this is our, broadly these are our DEI efforts as a congregation and in the community, partnering with a conservative congregation, B'nai Israel. But it was two women, Karen Herron and Marla Shulman, who met each other in a class taught by one of our congregants, Jacques Berlinerblau, and they got to talking about what they wanted to see as a reality, and talked about how we might engage in DEI work together. And it's spawned this incredible effort and ongoing, not just program, but engaging congregants across the board in both of our congregations, and now more broadly in our community, and really working on equity and looking at it internally within the congregation, but also out in the community. And one of the best parts of that for me has been watching our lay leaders and our members take ownership and make things happen, not just outside our walls, but also help to transform our culture inside the congregation as well.
Yeah, I did some reading about Sea Change, and of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, racial injustice is so front and center in the reform movement, in society as a whole, and certainly within Women of Reform Judaism, we in fact have a task force looking at DEI within the organization and what can we do as Women of Reform Judaism as well. And so I was really interested to learn a little about your Sea Change initiative. So thank you.
I will say we have a number of our leaders within our Women of Washington Hebrew who also are engaged and involved. And in fact, our sisterhood, our Women of Washington Hebrew, also have made that a pivotal issue, that because it is, and not only because it is important to the Women of Reform Judaism, but certainly they continue to be leaders in our movement. And that's an incredibly proud place to be as well. Absolutely.
And then as you were talking about the march a couple of years ago, I participated here in Atlanta, and it was similar to what you described, watching our young leaders stand up, take action, and actually teach the rest of us how it can be done was just so incredibly inspiring. And to have your daughter directly involved, really, how proud. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And you've really been doing this, but I'm going to ask you for another story about a time that Jewish values informed and influenced your work. And how do you think Jewish values and empowering others intersect?
That's a great question. My simple answer is every day in the work that I do, certainly. And also I think about this each time I lead services on a Saturday morning. I'm inspired and reminded again. We have values that we talk about each morning in our liturgy, Elu Devarim. These are the things that are without measure, and going through different aspects from honoring one's parents, to caring for the sick, to welcoming guests and strangers, to study, to consoling, comforting the bereaved. Every item that's on that list is something that I'm doing, maybe not all 10 of them every day, but certainly many of them, and at times multiple in a day. And it's a reminder that Jewish values are inspire us. One of the things that we have a quote in our Mishkan Tefillah prayer book that says, to pray as if everything depends upon God and act as if everything depends upon us. And that's the reality for me as a rabbi, is that we should be inspired by our texts and our prayers, but the inspiration is then to go out and do the work and to act in this world. And to me, that's part of that. Fulfilling that is empowering others. It's one thing for a rabbi to stand on the bima and talk about the things that we should be doing, or teach about the things that we should be doing. But it's another thing, ideally, we're all doing it together. When we're out there and doing the work, we're creating God's world, where we are fulfilling that mission to really bring about tikkun olam, to create wholeness in our world. And there are so many places so many aspects of our world that are broken and need repair and need wholeness and holiness. And by doing those, not just those Elu Devarim, those 10 things, but so many other aspects of how we live Jewishly inspire us to ensure that others will feel that sense of wholeness and holiness in this world.
So thinking about that, what piece of advice would you give to women? I'm going to ask this a little differently maybe than it was originally framed. Women who are trying to figure out, how do I start? Because as you know, there's so much that we can do. So how do I start, and how can I have my voice heard?
I think that's a challenging question for women, because often there's there can be a tendency among women to ask ourselves whether we are worthy of a position or a role, or taking on, the idea that when women, sometimes when women lean in, they get their hands slapped, or are told, that they're being too pushy. But then when we sit back and wait, then we're being too nice. And I think part of it is really having the courage and the strength to live your dreams, to really pursue the things that you feel passionate about. We just read, I know we just finished Passover, but before that we celebrated Purim, and the story of Esther always inspires in two ways. There are two strong women there. Vashti, who stood up for herself and said no, and sometimes we need to be brave enough to say no, and to rethink and take a different path. And Esther, who had to be reminded that maybe you were put here for such a moment as this, and to recognize that we each have opportunities, and I think part of our role as women can also be to help each other and to encourage each other to seize those opportunities. and to recognize that that there is great possibility and potential. And I think that that potential is only lifted and increased when we as women help other women, encourage other women to take those steps and to have that courage. And I am thinking about this also in light of having attended the CCAR convention last month, when we celebrated 50 years of women in the rabbinate, and our Vatikot, the first generation of female rabbis, and thinking about at times the courage, the persistence, and also the recognition that that they weren't just doing it for themselves, that all of our female rabbis in that first generation, and Sally Priesand is certainly was the first, and will also be the first to say that she also recognized that she was also, it was not just about her, that others were going to follow. And the sense that we still today, even though the numbers have increased, that we also need to make sure that we're working to create a culture and environment where all voices are lifted, where everyone feels they have that potential and that possibility, which also means at times raising up men's voices and recognizing, there's a famous story, and I've experienced this in one of my student pulpits when I was in rabbinical school. There are boys who don't realize that they can be rabbis too, because there are women rabbis in congregations, which is wonderful. And I think it's the idea of representation is so important. And so I want to make sure that we think about when women have a place at the table, we also, that also helps to ensure that others will have a place at the table as well. And that's something that studies show, that when women are at the table, marginalized groups are more likely to be lifted and raised to and brought to the table as well. And I think that that's something really important. But I think for women who are starting out, to not be afraid to reach out to another woman, whether it's a rabbi, whether it's a professional. There are women who worked hard to get to where they are and are looking to give back, to support someone else, because the road at times can be hard and challenging, but also it can be wonderful and beautiful and fulfilling. And there are times that it can be easy when we have the right guides along the way. And I think being able to ask for help, which again, sometimes can be the most challenging piece, can be asking for help and advice. But I know that there are women out there, whatever field you might be in, who want to pay it forward and make sure that there continue to be women at the table, on the bima, in the boardroom, wherever it might be. And I think that we have that responsibility to continue to lift up voices of other women.
Wow. You know, Washington Hebrew is actually the home of the founder of Women of Reform Judaism, Carrie Simon. And just listening to you, because her vision of bringing women together so that we could elevate all the voices, the power of women together, and that legacy is clearly there, as you've spoken about the women you've worked with in the congregation, and what you just so beautifully articulated about women supporting women, helping women, and in fact, helping everyone to elevate. So thank you for that. And
by the way, I was here for the 100th anniversary of our sisterhood at Washington Hebrew, and then certainly as we celebrated the Women of Reform Judaism centennial. But I walked by Carrie O. Simon's portrait every day, and a reminder that women have take on lots of important roles, both in our congregations and our community. And I believe I'd have to look, but hers is it's a large portrait. We don't have any of the rabbis with a large portrait like that in that particular hallway. which also says something about her role. We as a congregation are so incredibly proud of our women of Reformed Judaism and the work that they do to sustain us intellectually, spiritually, socially, and in so many other ways. And I feel so blessed to be able to work with them both individually and as a group, and also to be honored like this by the women who have lifted me up from my first days at Washington Hebrew.
Well, that's it for the questioning. But what a great conversation, and what a wonderful legacy within your congregation. And thank you for continuing that. It's obvious that empowering others in general is just intrinsic to your makeup. And we certainly all appreciate everything that you do. And I think you only scratched the surface today of some of the initiatives and the things in which you've been involved. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us today. Please join us again next week. Now, next week, we're live on Monday, May 2nd, and I will be having a Facebook Live conversation with another of our honorees, Mara Gad, who is the author of the remarkable book, The Color of Love, A Story of a Mixed Race Jewish Girl. And it is not too late to register for the Women's Empowerment Awards event on May 13th. You can go to our website, wrj.org, or you can use that QR code up in the corner of my portion of the screen, and that will take you to the site as well. And once again, thanks to Natalie Bowles for your help with tech support, and congratulations to Rabbi Susan Shankman.
Thank you so much, Blair.